Hello, this is Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 here to preview the Lexington Super Regional. That's right, the Lexington Super Regional. Not something we say a lot, but that is a testament to the job Nick Mingione has done at Kentucky. The regular season champs in the SEC are set to meet one of baseball's biggest powerhouses of the last 20 years, Oregon State. This should be a dandy of a matchup between two really good teams, and we'll break down each team for you in just a minute. But first, a reminder, we are brought to you by BetOnline, your number one source for the NBA Finals and Stanley Cup playoffs this season. Every stat, every matchup, every live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on all the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. Well, we will start with the Kentucky Wildcats, 22-8 in the regular season in the SEC. That got Kentucky a share of the SEC title along with Tennessee. The Cats then went on a run in the regional, winning 3-0 and advancing to the Super Regional. And we start our discussion of Kentucky with that lineup. It is a balanced lineup in terms of handedness. You got a couple of lefty-onlys in Ryan Nicholson and in James McCoy and Nick Lopez. Those latter two are switch hitters. But Kentucky's lineup was really not made so much by one or two guys. Now, look, Nicholson had a good home run season, and Waldschmidt, I thought, might have been the most underrated player in the SEC. That kid just got on a tear at times, and you could not get him out. But I think Kentucky's bigger thing is the balance in that lineup. Of their 9 starters, including the DH, I think Grant Smith is the only guy with an on-base percentage of under 375. And look, he was 356. And Grant Smith's a shortstop. His job is to field his position solidly, which he did. He had a 984 fielding percentage. So Grant Smith, hardly a weak link in that lineup. But by comparison, lagged his teammates. But again, that's more about his teammates than it is about him. You got guys that have played a lot of college baseball. Waldschmidt, Lopez, Emilien Pitre seems like he's been Kentucky's second baseman for years. The first two are transfers. Mitchell Daly played a lot of ball at Texas before this. Nicholson played a lot of ball at Cincinnati. Nolan McCarthy, their right fielder, has been in this system for a while. Devin Burks, their catcher, has been there a bit too. James McCoy's been at Kentucky a couple of years. You get the theme I'm giving you here. This is a very experienced lineup. It takes walks. It gets hit by pitches. It just drives you crazy as an opposing manager or opposing coach, just trying to stop these guys, because you can't just take out Waldschmidt and Nicholson and just take for granted that it's going to go well, because they'll foul off pitches. They'll get on base in a lot of ways. They'll steal bases. You had Waldschmidt stole 24. Pitre stole 24. Daly stole 10. Burks, their catcher, was 18 for 20 on stolen bases. So I think lineups like this, when you get into the postseason, you had better have a deep pitching staff, because they're just going to exhaust you, and that's what Kentucky does. Now, to Kentucky's pitching, I think that's probably my bigger question about this team. But I say question relatively speaking. This was a staff that had a good year. Even if the ERA was 5.21, I guess, this was a team that figured out how to get outs at the right time. And Trey Pooser, their starter, should be pitching, I guess, out of the number 1 hole again, or could be pitching number 2. I'll have to see how they go at it this weekend. But Pooser is their best guy. He enters the Super Regional with a 3.77 ERA, keeps the ball in the park. He gave up, 9 home runs and 76 in the third innings this year. So he's kind of been their rock in the rotation. Mason Moore and Dominic Neiman had really good seasons early and kind of faded late, but Moore gave them a good outing in the Super Regional. Neiman's been probably the bigger question mark of that rotation. He's got a 6.24 ERA, the lefty transfer from Central Connecticut. The other two guys are right-handers. And maybe probably behind Pooser right now, maybe the second most important guy on this pitching staff is Cameron O'Brien. He's the only guy who threw multiple outings in the regional. He's a righty transfer from Campbell, so he's pitched in the postseason before this. They leaned on him to throw over 20 pitches twice in the super regional. Other guys who threw, Ryan Hagenau, who's been really good lately, got a 1.96 ERA. Robert Hogan, he's really come on. The Texas A&M transfer, that gives him two pretty good righties out of the bullpen. Evan Byers threw in that. He's a lefty. And Jackson Novy, who's been a little up and down, also threw in the super regional. So that's what? 8 arms that threw for Nick Mingione, and they've got some more guys here that can throw. You could throw Travis Smith in a pinch. Drew Lafferty gave him 21 innings this year. You saw Ben Cleaver in Hoover, although I don't think you'll see him again. Anyway, this is a pitching staff. It's not spectacular. It's not always the prettiest thing, but they keep the ball on the ground. They keep the ball in the park. And that is a challenge when you pitch to Oregon State, and I'll get to those guys right now. That Oregon State lineup is a really, really good one. And, of course, the headliner, Travis Bazzana, who's going to be probably one of the first 5 guys taken in this summer's Major League Baseball draft. Boy, this guy had a year. He slugged .951, had a .580 on-base percentage, 28 home runs, walked 73 times, and only struck out 33. Just an amazing guy from Australia, just one of the best pure hitters we've seen in college baseball in a long time. He is one of 3 lefties in that lineup. Micah McDowell's a lefty, and Brady Casper is a lefty among their regulars. Dallas Macias is a switch hitter. So this is a pretty balanced lineup, can go 5-4, 6-3, that lefty-righty split, depending on who is on the other side of things. And they've got some power. This team hit 115 home runs, only gave up 41, which is interesting. Gavin Turley had 19 home runs. Elijah Hartline, their shortstop, had 10. Mason Guerra, their first baseman, hit 10 home runs. And so this is a lineup that got on base a lot. Bazzana, 580. McDowell, 494. Trent Caraway, 435. Macias, 396. They had one platoon situation. They will go, let's see, Trent Caraway and Jabin Trotsky. They'll platoon those guys at third base, both righties. So that's interesting. I don't know what they see in the matchups there, but they will do that sometimes. In terms of running, they'll run a little bit. Bazzana stolen 16 of 21 and striking out. They don't do that a lot. Other than Gavin Turley, who struck out 72 times, Hartline struck out 56. So I guess there's some moderate strikeout totals in here. Jacob Krieg struck out 66 times, but the top of their lineup, Bazzana, McDowell, those guys, Macias, pretty tough to strike out, which is really not what Kentucky does anyway. All right, the pitching staff. We saw 8 guys throw last weekend for Oregon State. Aiden May, their number 1, he had a 2.88 ERA, struck out 79 guys in 68 2/3 innings. He's a right-hander. So is Jacob Kmatz, who went 82 innings, struck out 88, had a 3.29 ERA. Eric Segura is their number 3, 461 earned run average in 66 1/3 innings, 69 strikeouts, 18 walks. And you had a lot of guys in the bullpen that pitched pretty well. One interesting guy, A.J. Lattery, who was a guy that pitched a lot for them last year, missed 3 months with an injury. He threw, I think, 34 pitches in one of the regional games. So I don't know what his role is, how much they will pace him or not pace him if he's back at 100%. But that's kind of a wild card to watch in this regional. One guy threw in all 3 games this weekend or this last weekend. That was Bridger Holmes, who is their closer. He had how many saves this year? 13 saves. And again, when you pitch all 3 times in a regional, that tells you something about your coach's trust. He had a 2.03 ERA. He had a batting average against of 152. Struck out 46 guys, but he walked 15 guys and he hit 17 guys. Hitting 17 guys in 31 innings, that's a lot. And boy, Kentucky will get hit by some pitches too. So that's an interesting one to watch. Other guys who threw in the regional, Joey Mundt threw 30 pitches in an outing. He has a 2.17 ERA in 29 innings. They also threw Nelson Keijo. He threw a couple times. I saw a lot. I didn't mean to do that. They do have two guys that threw a couple times in the regional. And they also threw A.J. Hutchinson. He had 18 pitches in an outing. He had a 4.81 ERA across 24 and a third innings. So this is a pitching staff that's pretty deep and pretty talented, and it had an ERA on the season of 3.96. All right, for picks, I have struggled on this one. On paper, just looking at the stats, it tilts towards Oregon State. I like to lean towards the team with the better pitching usually. That lineup hits home runs. But here's one thing or a couple things of interest. Kentucky does a pretty good job of keeping the ball in the park. Now, Oregon State's an interesting hitting team. That ballpark has got a 0.98 run factor, which means that it depresses runs scored by about 2% on average. That is probably a product of playing in the cool, damp Northwest, because I don't think the park dimensions there are crazy. And again, this is a lineup that got it out of there a good bit. Cool and damp describes a lot of what you see in Kentucky Proud Park too, but it will not be that way as we are sitting here in June. And again, Kentucky's pitching staff does worry me some. I think when you match them up on paper against Oregon State, a team that scored 505 runs and gave up 268 this year. By contrast, Kentucky scored 453 runs and gave up 310. And Kentucky also defended really well. There's a little bit of a gap between the ERA and what you would expect with the runs numbers, because this is a team that just fielded so well. Did not give up a lot of earned runs this year. So in any case, the one thing that to me is the deciding factor, Kentucky at home this year went 23-6. Oregon State went 9-10 on the road. This is one that I've just been on the fence about who to pick. I'm going to pick Kentucky because I think they're a great ball club and they're also at home, but this one could go either way. So if it's wrong, I'm going to guess it's because Oregon State got better pitching. We'll see how this goes. All right. Thank you for watching us here at Southeastern 14, presented by Bet Online. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll see you again soon with more SEC baseball content.